Hello and welcome to NIAB HQ. Here we are in the trial utilising some of our pre-breeding lines to look at the effect of drought on wheat. Now, as some of you may have realised, we've had quite a dry year, especially in Cambridgeshire. And if this dryness or lack of rain occurs at certain parts of growth development within the wheat, it can have a serious effect on the yield. Now, this problem isn't just limited to the UK. In places like Australia and India, it becomes even more severe. And in countries like India, where you're required to have irrigation, that can have a serious effect on the sustainability of the crop. You're essentially depleting the water resources available. So if this is an issue that's going to continue in the UK and around the world, it's quite serious that we actually look at how we can breed drought-resistant lines. So these pre-breeding lines have been selected for specific traits that could confer drought resistance. In some cases, it's looking at the root development to see if we can capture more water when there is rain. In other cases, we're looking at whether early flowering allows the wheat lines to essentially escape the effects of drought by going through their life cycle quicker. Or in other cases, we may be looking at whether a crop will stay greener for longer. So by essentially photosynthesizing for longer, you'll essentially have a slightly higher yield, which may compensate for the yield cost that is the drought. To study drought in the UK, you need two treatments. One irrigated treatment, where you're essentially trying to keep the soil moisture deficit close to zero to make sure the crops aren't stressed. And another droughted treatment, which is one here, where traditionally we'd usually have a tunnel constructed over the plots to ensure rain doesn't get to them. But this year, due to COVID, we've unfortunately had to forego that. Thankfully, it's been a very dry year, so that's not had a huge impact on the soil moisture. It's still remained very dry. This plot's one of the pre-breeding lines that's been grown in the irrigated section of the trial. And as you can see, it's performing very well under irrigated conditions. If we look at it in the droughted section of the trial, this plot essentially illustrates the difference you can usually see between irrigated wheat lines and those that are exposed to drought. This plot in general is doing quite well. The ear's filling nicely, the leaves are looking healthy. But when you compare it to the plot within the irrigated section, you'll see that that can come up to my shoulder. There's a lot more biomass and it's performing a lot better. So in general, relatively healthy, but you can actually see the effect of drought here. So within this plot, you can actually see that the wheat's performing quite nicely under the drought conditions, and it's holding up relatively well compared to what we've seen in the irrigated section. We've got nice green leaves, the ear's filling nicely, and there's been quite good tillering. In this plot, we can actually see there's quite a big difference between the droughted experiment here and what we see in the irrigated part of the trial. Whilst it's not performing too badly in terms of ear development, you can see there's quite a large effect on how the plant is performing in terms of photosynthesis. Ultimately, this is going to have quite a large effect on the yield. So once the season's finished, we'll be able to harvest this trial, and from that data, alongside the photosynthetic and development data I've mentioned before, we'll be able to look at different traits and see how they're actually affecting the plant's ability to respond to drought. And from that, hopefully we'll be able to give an idea to breeding programs, which traits would be best to focus on if you want to breed drought resistance. But also, because we know the genetic makeup of these lines, we'll also hopefully be able to hunt down which genes potentially would be best to look for to confer drought resistance within a UK and global environment.